Hey, welcome back to this mini lecture. My name is Dino. This one's on the limits on free speech. And to help show you what free speech is, I'm going to show you some various limitations within educational settings, which makes some kind of sense for our purposes because we're currently in an education setting, so it can give you some context for free speech, but also within a framework that you know about because you're learning. The first case is probably the seminal case for expression in schools. It's called Tinker. It's decided in 1969. The fact situation: five students who were 8 to 15 years old. They protested the Vietnam War by wearing black armbands to school. There is a pictures of it. Lots of peace sign on there on those black armbands. The principal suspended these students until they removed the bands. That was the decision. Um, Eventually it made its way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decided that the First Amendment did not permit a public school to punish the student for wearing a black armband as an anti-war protest, absent any evidence that the rule was necessary to avoid substantial interference with school discipline or the rights of others. Again, always remember a key test: avoid substantial interference with school discipline or the rights of others. This is a seminal quote from Justice Abe Fortas, again for the U.S. Supreme Court. It can hardly be argued that either students or teachers shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate. By saying this, Fortas is saying that even students, vulnerable population, have a constitutional right to free speech and expression. But it is constrained, as we'll see in the next case. Bethel, 1986. The facts: high school prankster nominates a classmate for student body VP with a sexual innuendo filled but not obscene school speech. If you have the chance, it's very typical high school guy humor. I think if you went to high school in North America, you unfortunately might get what I'm getting across. The principal suspended the prankster for 3 days. The prankster was also prohibited from speaking at a graduation ceremony, and his name was stricken from the grad speaker list. That was a punishment. At the Supreme Court, they decided that the First Amendment permits a public school to punish a student for giving a lewd and indecent, even if it's not obscene, speech at a school assembly. So again, um, from the Tinker case, there are students do have constitutional right to express themselves, but being lewd and indecent, even if they're not obscene, is a limit, especially like if you're at a school assembly where it can cause disruptions and interference with the learning process. Number three, Hazelwood. This is more of a serious case. Two newspaper articles were censored from the Spectrum, the student newspaper of Hazelwood East High School in St. Louis. The first article was about divorce within the school, and the second article was about teen pregnancy. What the Supreme Court decided in this case was that school administrators could exercise prior restraint of school-sponsored expression. They can restrain curriculum-based student newspapers and assembly speeches if the censorship is reasonably related to legitimate pedagogical concerns. So, prior restraint meaning that they could prohibit the speech before it was uttered, in this case, before it was printed and the paper was printed and given out to students. And then the test for this was based on the idea that it was reasonably related to legitimate public pedagogical concerns. And in this case, that would be the students are apparently learning from creating the students' paper, so the justices said that they can limit it if it's within this pedagogical concern. And then also the school actually sponsored, they paid money for the paper, so they're paying for it, so the idea that they can restrain the speech within it makes some kind of sense to the court. The biggest case, I don't know if you might know, the biggest case for prior restraint was decided in case number 4, New York Times versus United States, 1971. More notoriously and infamously known as the Pentagon Papers case. Back in those days, the Nixon administration sought to enjoin the New York Times and the Washington Post from publishing excerpts from a top secret U.S. Department of Defense history of U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War over about a 25-year span. Government tried to use the national security exemption The Supreme Court struck down the injunctions. Decision was fragmented. 9 separate opinions filed. It was unclear on the effect of future prior restraints cases. However, prior restraint was not allowed in this case. So there you go. There are some definite limits on free speech, definitely in schools. Students have a constitutional right to free expression at a school, such as the Tinker case, but in the subsequent cases, that free speech can be constrained. Enjoy your free speech, kids, students. I look forward to seeing you at the next video. Thanks for watching.